The cabin lights flickered at 30,000 feet, and Carol Sterling glanced up from her laptop with a frown. She was seated in first class, row 2, window seat, surrounded by the quiet hum of privilege. Across the aisle and 3 rows back, a man in a faded denim jacket sat with a young girl who was coloring in a worn sketchbook. Carol watched them for a moment, her lip curling slightly. Economy passengers. They had walked past her during boarding, the man carrying a small backpack, the girl clutching a stuffed rabbit with one missing ear. Carol had made a point of looking away as if their presence might somehow diminish her own. The flight attendant approached with champagne, and Carol accepted the glass without acknowledgement. She turned back to her screen, dismissing the father and daughter from her thoughts entirely. But in exactly 47 minutes, an F-18 Super Hornet would appear off the starboard wing of this aircraft. And everything Carol Sterling believed about the quiet man in the denim jacket would shatter into 1,000 pieces. Jack Walker was 41 years old. His hands were rough from years of work, his eyes tired but warm, and his shoulders carried the kind of weight that never fully lifted. He sat in seat 14F with his daughter Emma, who was 8 years old and had her mother's smile. Emma was drawing a picture of a house with a yellow sun and 2 stick figures holding hands. One was tall, one was small. She labeled them in careful crayon letters, Daddy and me. Jack watched her work, his heart full and aching at the same time. 3 years ago, his wife Sarah had lost her battle with cancer. She had fought hard, and Jack had been there for every treatment, every hospital visit, every long night when hope seemed like a cruel joke. After she passed, Jack's world narrowed to a single point of focus: Emma. He had left everything else behind: his career, his identity, his past. Before Sarah got sick, Jack had been someone else entirely. Lieutenant Commander Jack Walker, United States Navy, call sign Vanguard. He had flown F-18 Super Hornets off the deck of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, executing missions that would never appear in any newspaper. He had been one of the most decorated pilots in his squadron, with commendations for valor that sat in a box somewhere in his closet, unseen and unmentioned. When Sarah's diagnosis came, Jack made a choice. He walked away from the sky, turned down a promotion to commander, declined a prestigious posting to the Naval War College. He chose hospital rooms over cockpits, bedside vigils over carrier landings, and when Sarah died, he chose Emma over everything else that remained. Now he worked as a mechanic at a small aircraft repair shop in Colorado. He fixed engines, replaced parts, and came home every day at 3:30 to pick Emma up from school. The pay was modest, the hours were predictable, and that was exactly what Emma needed. Jack needed it too, even if he would never admit how much he missed the sky. Today they were flying to San Diego. Sarah's mother, Emma's grandmother, was turning 70. It was the first time in 2 years that Jack had agreed to travel by air. The sound of jet engines still triggered something in him, a longing he tried to bury beneath oil changes and bedtime stories. But Emma had asked, "Please, Daddy, Grandma needs us." And Jack could never say no to those eyes, so much like her mother's. The boarding process had been uneventful. Jack carried their small bag, Emma held her rabbit, and they found their seats in the back of the economy cabin. The flight attendant who checked their boarding passes had smiled warmly at Emma and offered her a pair of plastic wings. Emma pinned them to her shirt immediately, beaming with pride. But not everyone had been so welcoming. As they walked down the aisle, Jack noticed the woman in first class: expensive suit, diamond earrings, laptop open to what looked like financial projections. She had glanced at them and then looked away with an expression Jack recognized: dismissal, judgment. The look of someone who measured worth in net worth. He had seen it before, many times. It no longer bothered him. What mattered was Emma. What mattered was getting her to her grandmother's birthday. What mattered was being present, being steady, being the father she deserved. Jack settled into his seat and helped Emma with her seatbelt. She pulled out her crayons and began to draw. The plane taxied toward the runway, engines building to a familiar roar. Jack closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him. Somewhere deep in his memory, he was not in seat 14F. He was strapped into a cockpit, the catapult about to launch him into the sky. But that was another life, another man. He opened his eyes and watched his daughter draw, and he reminded himself that this life, this quiet life, was the one he had chosen. The first hour of the flight passed without incident. Emma finished her drawing and started a new one, this time with an airplane and clouds. Jack read a paperback novel he had brought, though his attention drifted. He was aware of the subtle sounds of flight, the minor adjustments in pitch and yaw, the way the engines modulated during different phases of cruise. Old habits died hard. Around the 90-minute mark, Emma needed to use the restroom. Jack walked her up the aisle, past the curtain that separated economy from first class, toward the lavatories at the front of the plane. The first-class cabin was nearly empty. Only a few passengers occupied the wide leather seats. Carol Sterling was one of them. She was on her phone speaking in clipped tones about quarterly projections and market positioning. Her voice carried the sharp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Jack waited with Emma outside the lavatory. The occupied sign glowed red. Emma shifted from foot to foot, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Daddy, I really have to go." "Just a minute, sweetheart." "Almost. There." Carol ended her call and looked up. Her gaze swept over Jack and Emma with undisguised contempt. She turned to the flight attendant who was passing by. "Excuse me, is there a reason economy passengers are congregating in first class?" The flight attendant, a young woman named Maria, hesitated. "They are just waiting for the lavatory, ma'am. There is one available in the back." Carol's eyes narrowed. "Then perhaps they should use it. This area is for first-class passengers. Some of us have work to do and do not need the distraction." Jack said nothing. His jaw tightened, but he remained silent. He had learned long ago that engaging with people like this only prolonged the encounter. Emma looked up at him, confused. "Daddy, why is that lady angry?" "She is not angry, sweetheart. She is just busy. We will wait here. It is fine." Carol scoffed audibly. "Busy?" "Yes, I am busy. Some of us have responsibilities that extend beyond coloring books and discount flights." The words hung in the air like a slap. Maria, the flight attendant, flushed with embarrassment. "Ma'am, I really do not think that is necessary." Jack placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, gently guiding her back. "Come on, Em. We will use the other one." But as they turned to walk away, Carol added one more comment, loud enough to ensure Jack heard it. "This is exactly why I always fly private. You never know what sort of people you will be trapped with." Jack stopped. For a moment he stood perfectly still. His shoulders were rigid. His hands, those rough hands that had once gripped the throttle of a $44 million fighter jet, curled into loose fists. Then he exhaled slowly, deliberately, and he walked away without a word. Emma looked up at him as they made their way back down the aisle. "Daddy, that lady was really mean." "I know, baby." Jack's voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, a controlled tension. "But we do not have to be mean back. That is not who we are." "But she said bad things about us." Jack knelt down in the aisle, meeting his daughter's eyes. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Some people judge others by what they see on the outside. They look at clothes or seats on a plane or jobs, and they think they know everything about a person. But they do not know anything. They do not know what is in here." He placed his hand gently over her heart. "This is what matters, Emma. Not where you sit, not what you wear, what is in here. And you have the biggest heart of anyone I know." Emma's eyes glistened. She hugged her rabbit tighter, like Mommy had. Jack's throat tightened, exactly like Mommy had. They continued to the lavatory in the back of the plane. When Emma emerged a few minutes later, she seemed to have recovered her spirits. She skipped back to their seats and resumed her drawing. Jack sat beside her, staring out the window at the clouds below. He did not think about Carol Sterling. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he had made to her in those final days. "Take care of our girl. Be there for her. Do not let anything take you away from her. He had kept that promise every single day. The flight continued smoothly for another 20 minutes. Then the first sign of trouble appeared. A subtle vibration ran through the airframe, barely noticeable to most passengers, but Jack felt it immediately. His body recognized the sensation before his mind could process it. Something was wrong. He leaned toward the window, scanning the wing. The engine on the starboard side looked normal. No visible smoke, no unusual movement. But the vibration persisted, a rhythmic tremor that spoke of mechanical distress. Emma looked up from her drawing. "Daddy, do you feel that?" Jack forced a smile. "Just some bumpy air, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." But he was worried, and his concern deepened when the cabin lights flickered. A murmur rippled through the passengers. Someone behind them asked loudly if everything was okay. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Harris. We are experiencing some minor technical difficulties with one of our systems. There is no cause for alarm. Our crew is working to resolve the issue. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Jack's trained ears heard what the captain did not say, the careful neutrality in his voice, the slight hesitation before the word minor. Whatever was happening in that cockpit, it was not minor. Across the aisle, a businessman began typing furiously on his phone. A woman a few rows up started crying softly. Emma gripped Jack's hand. "Are we going to be okay, Daddy? We are going to be fine." Jack squeezed her fingers. "I promise." But even as he spoke the words, his mind was racing. He cataloged the possibilities: hydraulic failure, electrical malfunction, flight control system error. Any of these could cause the symptoms he was observing, and any of them could become catastrophic if not handled correctly. The intercom crackled again, this time a different voice, tenser, more urgent. "This is First Officer Chen. We need any passengers with technical aviation experience to identify themselves to a crew member immediately. I repeat, we need technical aviation assistance." Silence fell over the cabin. Passengers looked at each other, confused and frightened. Technical aviation experience. The request was extraordinary. Airlines did not ask passengers for help unless the situation was desperate. Jack sat very still, his past pressed against his chest like a physical weight. He had spent a decade burying it, hiding from it, pretending it no longer existed. But that past had given him skills that might be needed right now. Emma looked at him with those trusting eyes. "Daddy?" Jack made his decision. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Inside, tucked behind his driver's license, was a card he had not looked at in 3 years. His naval aviator certification, faded but still valid. "Stay here, sweetheart." Jack unbuckled his seatbelt. "Stay in your seat no matter what happens. I will be right back. Where are you going?" Jack leaned down and kissed her forehead. "To help." He walked up the aisle toward the front of the plane. Passengers watched him pass, this ordinary-looking man in his faded jacket and worn jeans. Nobody moved to stop him. Nobody recognized the purpose in his stride, the calm focus that had settled over his features like a mask. When he reached the first-class cabin, Carol Sterling looked up from her laptop. Her face was pale now, her arrogance replaced by fear. She stared at Jack as he walked past, but he did not acknowledge her. He had more important things to do. The flight attendant named Maria intercepted him near the cockpit door. "Sir, you cannot be up here. I am a naval aviator." Jack showed her the card. "Lieutenant Commander, F-18 pilot, over 2,000 flight hours. I can help." Maria's eyes widened. She grabbed the intercom phone and spoke rapidly into it. A moment later, the cockpit door opened. Captain Harris stood in the doorway. He was a gray-haired man in his late 50s, calm but clearly stressed. "You are the Navy pilot?" "Yes, sir. What is the situation?" Harris stepped aside and gestured Jack into the cockpit. Jack entered and the door sealed behind him. The space was cramped and familiar, different configuration than an F-18, but the fundamentals were the same. Instruments, displays, controls, the language of flight. First Officer Chen was in the right seat, hands moving rapidly across the console. He glanced at Jack with a mixture of hope and desperation. We have lost partial hydraulic pressure. System A is fluctuating. We are getting intermittent failures in the fly-by-wire backup. Jack studied the displays. What happened? We do not know. Chen shook his head. It started about 20 minutes ago. Pressure drops, warning lights, then the vibration. We thought it was a sensor malfunction, but now the controls are getting sluggish. Jack leaned closer to the primary flight display. The aircraft was maintaining altitude, but the numbers told a troubling story. They were flying on borrowed time. Have you tried isolating the hydraulic loops? Harris nodded. Standard procedure. System B is compensating, but we are not sure how long it will hold. If we lose both systems, we lose flight control authority. Jack's mind raced through scenarios. In an F-18, he would have ejection as a last resort. In a commercial airliner with 200 passengers, there was no such option. What about manual reversion? Chen shook his head. This aircraft does not have full manual backup. We are fly-by-wire dependent. If the computers lose hydraulic input, we lose the ability to maneuver. Jack stared at the instruments. His training had prepared him for emergencies, for split-second decisions at Mach speeds, for combat situations where hesitation meant death. But this was different. This was not about saving himself. This was about saving everyone on this plane, including Emma. He pushed the thought aside. He could not afford to think about Emma right now. He needed to focus. What is your current position? We are over the Mojave. Harris pulled up the navigation display. Nearest suitable airport is Edwards Air Force Base, about 40 miles northeast. Jack felt something shift in his chest. Edwards. He knew Edwards. He had landed there a dozen times during his Navy career. He also knew that Edwards was an active military installation with emergency response capabilities that no civilian airport could match. Can you contact Edwards Approach Control? Already tried. Harris grimaced. They are aware of our situation, but they are telling us to divert to civilian fields. Standard protocol for commercial traffic. Jack shook his head. You need to declare a full emergency. Tell them you have a naval aviator on board who is recommending immediate diversion to Edwards. Use my call sign, Vanguard. Harris stared at him. Your call sign? Jack met his eyes steadily. They will know who I am. Trust me. Harris hesitated only a moment. Then he keyed the radio. Edwards Approach, this is United Flight 447 declaring emergency. We have hydraulic failure and are requesting immediate divert to Edwards Air Force Base. We have a naval aviator on board, call sign Vanguard, who is recommending this course of action. Silence on the radio, then a burst of static. Flight 447, Edwards Approach. Say again the call sign of your naval aviator, Vanguard. Jack leaned toward the microphone. Edwards, this is Lieutenant Commander Jack Walker, Vanguard. I am on board as a passenger. Aircraft is experiencing progressive hydraulic degradation. Recommend immediate vector to Edwards and scramble emergency response. Copy that. The controller's voice had changed. It was sharper now. More alert. Flight 447, you are cleared direct to Edwards. Descend and maintain 15,000. Expect runway 22. We are rolling emergency equipment and Vanguard. There was a pause. Welcome back, sir. Jack closed his eyes for a moment. Welcome back. He had not expected those words. He had walked away from that world 3 years ago. But the world, it seemed, had not forgotten him. The cockpit became a controlled chaos of checklists and procedures. Jack worked alongside Harris and Chen, his hands moving with the muscle memory of 1,000 emergencies. He called out readings, suggested adjustments, anticipated problems before they materialized. The hydraulic system continued to degrade, but they managed to stabilize the aircraft enough to begin their descent. In the cabin, the passengers knew only that something was wrong. The flight attendants moved through the aisles with forced calm, checking seat belts and stowing loose items. They did not explain the full situation. They did not mention that the plane might be fighting for its life. Emma sat in her seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She was scared, but she remembered what her father had said. "Stay here. I will be right back." She trusted him. She had always trusted him. He was her daddy, and he had never broken a promise to her. In first class, Carol Sterling gripped her armrest with white-knuckled hands. The champagne had long since gone flat. Her laptop was closed. All her wealth, all her status, all her carefully constructed superiority meant nothing now. She was just another passenger, just another human being facing the terrifying possibility of death. And she was thinking about the man she had mocked. The quiet man with the little girl, the man who had walked past her toward the cockpit with such purpose. She had seen the flight attendant speak to him, had seen him show some kind of card, and then he had disappeared into the cockpit, and he had not come out. Who was he? What was he doing up there? Could someone like him actually help? The questions swirled through her mind as the plane descended. She thought about the things she had said to him, the cruelty, the condescension, the casual dismissal of his worth as a human being. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Carol Sterling felt shame. The approach to Edwards was tense. The hydraulic pressure continued to fluctuate. Warning lights flashed, alarms sounded. But Jack's voice remained steady, guiding Harris through each obstacle. Reduce power, adjust pitch, watch your airspeed, easy on the controls. The runway appeared through the windscreen, a long gray strip in the desert landscape. Emergency vehicles lined both sides, their lights flashing red and blue. Fire trucks, ambulances, crash rescue teams. They were expecting the worst. Harris was sweating. His hands trembled on the yoke. Jack placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "You have got this, Captain. Just fly the airplane, one thing at a time." "I cannot." Harris's voice cracked. "The controls are too heavy. I cannot hold the lineup." "Then let me help." Jack did not wait for permission. He moved to the center console, reaching for the backup trim controls. He made micro-adjustments, compensating for the hydraulic loss, helping Harris maintain the glide path. The runway grew larger in the windscreen, 500 feet, 300, 100. The wheels touched the pavement with a hard jolt. The plane bounced, then settled. Harris applied the brakes, and the aircraft began to slow. Emergency vehicles raced alongside them, ready to respond to any sign of fire or structural failure. But there was no fire, no failure. The plane rolled to a stop on the runway, intact and safe. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Captain Harris let out a long, shuddering breath. "We made it." His voice was barely a whisper. "We actually made it." Jack leaned back against the cockpit wall. His heart was pounding, his hands were shaking, but they had made it, all of them. "Thank you." Harris turned to look at him. "I do not know who you are or where you came from, but thank you. You saved this plane. You saved all of us." Jack shook his head. "You flew her. Down, Captain. I just helped with the math." But Harris was not fooled. He had been flying for 30 years. He knew the difference between luck and skill, between assistance and salvation. He knew that without the man standing before him, this flight would have ended very differently. The cockpit door opened. Maria, the flight attendant, stood there, tears streaming down her face. "We made it. We made it." Jack stepped out of the cockpit and into the first-class cabin. The passengers stared at him with wide eyes. They had heard bits and pieces over the intercom. They knew something extraordinary had happened. They just did not know what. Carol Sterling rose from her seat as Jack approached. Her face was pale, her eyes red. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Jack stopped in front of her. He looked at her for a long moment. There was no anger in his eyes, no vindication, just exhaustion, and something that might have been compassion. "You asked earlier what sort of people you might be trapped with on a flight like this." He paused. "Sometimes you are trapped with the person who saves your life." He walked past her, down the aisle, toward economy class, toward Emma. Carol Sterling stood frozen, watching him go. The other first-class passengers watched too, and then one by one they began to clap. The applause spread through the cabin like a wave. Passengers who had no idea what had happened joined in, caught up in the emotion of survival, of gratitude, of relief. By the time Jack reached row 14, the entire plane was on its feet. Emma jumped up and threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. "Daddy, you came back. You said you would come back, and you did." Jack held her tight, his face buried in her hair. "I will always come back, sweetheart, always." Around them, passengers continued to applaud. Some were crying, some were laughing, all of them were alive. The emergency exit procedures went smoothly. Passengers were evacuated onto the tarmac where buses waited to transport them to a nearby terminal. Medical personnel checked everyone for injuries. Remarkably, there were none. The mechanical failure that had nearly doomed them was later determined to be a manufacturing defect in the hydraulic system. A defect that had somehow escaped quality control. A defect that, under normal circumstances, would have caused a catastrophic crash. But circumstances had not been normal, because Jack Walker had been on that plane. While the passengers were being processed, something unusual happened on the tarmac. A military vehicle pulled up near the aircraft, its markings identifying it as belonging to the Naval Air Warfare Center at Edwards. Two officers stepped out. Both wore flight suits. Both carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of fighter pilots. They approached Jack, who was standing with Emma near one of the buses. Lieutenant Commander Walker, the senior officer, saluted. "Commander Williams, VFA 154 Black Knights. We received word you were on board. We wanted to come pay our respects." Jack returned the salute, though he looked uncomfortable. "That is not necessary, Commander. I am retired." "With respect, sir, no one like you is ever really retired." Williams glanced at Emma and smiled. "Is this the famous Emma? We have heard stories." Emma looked up at her father, confused. "Daddy, who are these people?" Jack hesitated. "They are old friends, sweetheart, from before you were born." Williams crouched down to Emma's level. "Your dad is a hero, Emma. Did you know that? He used to fly jets, faster than anything." Emma's eyes went wide. "Daddy flew jets, the fastest ones." Williams nodded. "And today he saved a whole airplane full of people. Because that is what your dad does. He saves people." Emma looked at Jack with new wonder. Her father, the quiet mechanic. Her father, who made her breakfast and helped with her homework and tucked her in at night. Her father, the hero. "Is that true, Daddy?" Jack knelt beside her, his eyes glistening. "I used to fly jets, baby. A long time ago, before you were born. But then Mommy got sick and I decided that being with her and being with you was more important than anything else. I wanted to be your daddy first. Everything else came second." Emma threw her arms around his neck. "You are the best daddy in the whole world." Jack held her tight, his composure finally breaking. Tears streamed down his face. He did not care that military officers were watching. He did not care that passengers were staring. His daughter was in his arms, they were both alive, and nothing else mattered. The aftermath of the emergency landing drew significant attention. News crews arrived. Reporters clamored for interviews. The story of the single father who had helped save a commercial airliner became national news within hours. But Jack refused every interview request. He shielded Emma from the cameras and declined to make any public statements. He did not want attention. He did not want recognition. He just wanted to get his daughter to her grandmother's birthday party. The airline arranged for alternative transportation. A private car took Jack and Emma to San Diego, where Sarah's mother was waiting. When they arrived, the elderly woman took one look at her son-in-law and burst into tears. I saw the news. She hugged him fiercely. I saw what happened. I was so scared. We are okay. Jack returned the embrace. We are both okay. Emma spent the rest of the day surrounded by family, eating birthday cake and playing with cousins she rarely got to see. Jack sat on the porch, watching the sunset over the Pacific. He thought about Sarah, about the choice he had made 3 years ago, about whether she would be proud of the life he had built without her. He believed she would. He hoped she would. Later that evening, he received a phone call from an unknown number. He almost did not answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Walker. The voice was crisp, authoritative. "This is Admiral Patricia Reyes, Commander, Naval Air Forces." Jack straightened reflexively. "Admiral, I wanted to call personally to thank you for what you did today. Your actions saved 206 lives. I also wanted to apologize." "Apologize, ma'am?" "For not reaching out sooner. When you left the service, we should have done more to stay in touch. We should have let you know that the Navy does not forget its own, and that we were grateful for your sacrifice. Both the sacrifice you made in combat and the sacrifice you made when you left to care for your family." Jack was silent for a long moment. "I appreciate that, Admiral, more than you know. There is something else." Reyes paused. "We tracked the flight today. When Edwards confirmed your presence on board, they scrambled a response team. But they also did something else." "What was that?" "They sent an escort." Jack frowned. "An escort?" "Look out your window, Commander." Jack walked to the sliding glass door and stepped onto the patio. The sun had nearly set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. And there, against the fading light, he saw it. An F-18 Super Hornet flying low along the coastline. As Jack watched, the aircraft tilted its wings. A salute. The traditional gesture of respect from one aviator to another. Jack's breath caught in his throat. "The Navy remembers, Mr. Walker." Reyes's voice was warm now. "And we salute you." The F-18 completed its pass and climbed away, disappearing into the darkening sky. Jack stood on the patio, watching it go, tears streaming down his face. Behind him, he heard the patio door slide open. Emma stepped out, holding a piece of paper. "Daddy? What is it, sweetheart?" Emma handed him the paper. It was a drawing, an airplane with people visible through the windows, a man standing in the cockpit, and at the bottom, in careful crayon letters, "My daddy the hero." Jack sank to his knees and pulled his daughter into his arms. He held the drawing like it was made of gold. "This is beautiful, Emma. I love it." Emma smiled and hugged him tight. "You saved all those people, Daddy. The people on the news said so." Jack kissed the top of her head. "I just did what needed to be done, baby. That is what heroes do, though." Emma pulled back and looked at him with her mother's eyes. "You do what needs to be done." Jack smiled through his tears. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he had made, about the life he had chosen. Maybe, he thought, maybe that is exactly right. 2 weeks later, Jack returned to work at the aircraft repair shop in Colorado. His coworkers had seen the news. They looked at him differently now, with a kind of odd respect that made him uncomfortable. But they did not treat him differently. They still asked him to fix engines, still shared coffee with him in the break room, still complained about the Broncos' losing season. And that was exactly what Jack wanted. Normal, ordinary, quiet. One afternoon, a visitor arrived at the shop. Jack was under the hood of a Cessna 172 when his boss called out to him. "Walker, someone here to see you." Jack wiped his hands on a rag and walked to the front office. Standing there, looking deeply out of place in her designer suit and expensive shoes, was Carol Sterling. Jack stopped in his tracks. "Miss Sterling?" Carol looked at him. Her face was different than he remembered, softer, more uncertain. The sharp edges of arrogance had been worn away by something, perhaps by 2 weeks of reflection on what it meant to be alive. "Mr. Walker." She took a deep breath. "I do not know how to say this. I have given speeches to thousands of people. I have negotiated deals worth billions of dollars, but I do not know how to say this." Jack waited. "I am sorry." The words came out rushed, almost desperate. "I am so sorry for what I said to you on that plane. I was cruel. I was arrogant. I judged you without knowing anything about you. And then you saved my life. You saved everyone's life. And I needed to tell you. I needed you to know how ashamed I am of who I was in that moment." Jack studied her for a long moment. She was trembling. Her eyes were wet. This was not the woman who had sneered at him in first class. This was someone else. Someone broken open by the experience of mortality. Someone who had been forced to confront the ugliness inside herself. "How did you find me?" Jack asked quietly. "I hired someone," Carol admitted. "I had to find you. I had to apologize in person. It was the only way I could live with myself." Jack nodded slowly. He thought about what Emma had asked him on the plane. Why is that lady so mean? And he thought about what he had told her. We do not have to be mean back. That is not who we are. Apology accepted. He said it simply, without drama. Carol blinked. "Just like that? You do not want to yell at me. Tell me what a terrible person I am. I think you have already told yourself that plenty of times." Jack shrugged. "And I meant what I said to Emma. We do not have to be mean back. Holding on to anger does not help anyone. It just makes us smaller." Carol stared at him. "Who are you? How can you be so forgiving?" Jack considered the question. "I spent years flying into combat, Miss Sterling. I have seen people die. I have held dying men in my arms. I have made choices that still keep me up at night. And I learned something from all of it. Life is too short for grudges. People make mistakes. What matters is whether they learn from them." Carol was crying now, tears streaming freely down her face. "I want to learn. I want to be better. I do not want to be the person I was on that plane. Then be better." Jack smiled gently. "It is that simple, and that hard." He extended his hand. She shook it, her grip trembling. Before she left, Carol paused at the door. "The little girl. Emma, is she okay?" "She is great." Jack's face softened. "She drew me a picture of the airplane. She labeled me my daddy the hero." Carol smiled through her tears. "She is. Right, you know. You are a hero." Jack shook his head. "No, I am just a dad who got lucky. The heroes are the ones who do not come home." Carol nodded slowly. She seemed to understand. She walked out of the shop and drove away. Jack watched her go, then returned to the Cessna engine he had been working on. Just another day, just another ordinary moment in his quiet life. But something had shifted, something had healed. Not just in Carol Sterling, but in Jack Walker, too. 6 months later, Jack stood in the hangar of the Naval Air Station in Coronado, California. Emma was beside him wearing a new dress and clutching the same stuffed rabbit she had held on the plane. Before them, an audience of naval officers, pilots, and dignitaries waited in respectful silence. Admiral Reyes stood at a podium, a medal case in her hands. Lieutenant Commander Jack Walker, she read from a citation, "For extraordinary heroism and exceptional skill in averting a catastrophic aviation disaster. For placing the lives of 206 passengers above his own safety, and for exemplifying the highest traditions of naval aviation, even in retirement. The Navy is proud to award you the Distinguished Flying Cross." Jack stepped forward and accepted the medal. The audience applauded. Officers who had served with him years ago saluted. He saw Commander Williams from the Black Knights and Captain Harris from the airliner, and even First Officer Chen, all of them there to honor the man who had saved their lives or the lives of their brothers and sisters in arms. But Jack did not look at any of them. He looked at Emma. His daughter was beaming at him with those eyes, her mother's eyes, so full of pride and love that Jack thought his heart might burst. After the ceremony, they walked along the waterfront. The sun was setting over the Pacific, just like it had on the night of Emma's grandmother's birthday. Jack held Emma's hand as they watched the light fade. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "Do you miss flying?" Jack was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes." "Do you wish you had kept doing it, instead of staying with me?" Jack stopped walking. He knelt down so he could look Emma in the eye. Never. He said it with absolute certainty, not for one single second. Flying was wonderful, it was exciting and important, and I was good at it. But being your daddy is the best thing I have ever done, the best thing I will ever do. Nothing else even comes close. Emma smiled, that smile that looked so much like Sarah's. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby, more than all the stars in the sky. They walked on as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Behind them, the lights of the Naval Air Station began to flicker on one by one. Above them, the first stars appeared. And somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of the sky, the spirit of a fighter pilot who had chosen love over glory smiled down at the man who had become so much more than a hero. He had become a father, and that, in the end, was the only rank that ever mattered.